Title: The Desolate Era. Chapter 1: Ashes of the Fallen Star. The night the sky burned, the world held its breath. Across the broken lands of the Sundering Realm, a blood-red comet tore through the heavens, setting the shattered clouds ablaze. Great sects and wandering cultivators looked up from their remote sanctuaries and whispered prayers, or curses. In the village of Qingxi, tucked into the folds of forgotten hills, the old crones pointed to the fire in the sky and muttered, "A calamity is born." It was on this night that Xuan came into the world, shrieking louder than the howling winds. The villagers always said he was cursed. Born under a falling star, misfortune will cling to him like rot, they hissed, dragging their children away whenever Xuan stumbled through the market, barefoot and bruised. His mother had died giving birth to him. His father, a minor cultivator, had vanished into the void seas soon after, chasing treasures beyond reach. Only Granny Chen, the half-mad apothecary, bothered to feed the boy. Scraps of stale bread, bitter tea, an occasional smile. Xuan grew thin and wiry, his eyes like cracked jade, always burning with an ember that refused to die. At 16, he still had not awakened his spiritual root. It was unheard of. In the Sundering Realm, even the poorest peasants had a chance. Children of 7 or 8 would proudly show their spirit roots: earth, fire, water, wood, metal, however weak. At 16, Xuan was a joke, an outcast, spiritless trash, better suited to digging graves than dreaming of cultivation. Yet at night, when he sat atop the jagged rocks overlooking the misty valley, he felt something ancient, something heavy, pulsing in the cracked earth and the cold stars. "I was born under that falling star," he whispered to himself, "then I will rise by it." One gray morning, as the valley choked on cold mist, a company of cloaked men rode into Qingxi. They were examiners of the Azure Jade sect, one of the 5 great clans that ruled the eastern fragments of the realm. Every 10 years they scoured the land for new blood, testing the young and desperate for signs of talent. The whole village gathered on the cracked square. One by one, the children placed their hands upon the jade pearl, a relic that could draw out one's hidden potential. One by one, the pearl flickered or shone brightly, rewarding gasps, applause, or soft sobs. Xuan stood last in line. When he approached, the crowd grew hushed. A few even chuckled. The examiner, a tall, hawk-faced man named Elder Mu, narrowed his eyes. "The bastard son of Qingxi," he muttered, "wasting our time." Nevertheless, duty demanded he administer the test. Xuan placed his hand on the pearl. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pearl shuddered. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface. A dim ash-gray light seeped from within, neither bright nor dead, like the final breath of a dying flame. The villagers recoiled. Elder Mu cursed and yanked Xuan's hand away. "Contaminated," he barked. "An ash spirit, omen of ruin." The verdict was immediate. Xuan was forbidden from approaching any sect, forbidden from cultivating, a crippled destiny. That night, Xuan sat atop his rock staring into the abyss of mist. Ash spirit, he thought. Omen of ruin. So what? His fists clenched until his nails cut skin. If the heavens closed one door, he would carve another. If the heavens spat on him, he would tear them down. Above, hidden by layers of cloud, the ancient comet still burned. And beneath Xuan's chest, in the depths of his soul, a tiny ember flickered, unseen by mortal eyes. The next day, while fetching water at the dried riverbed, Xuan overheard the merchant tongues wagging. "Did you hear? The forbidden ruins opened again, and—" "Nonsense. Those who go never return. But they say this time the Crimson Mapstone appeared. It's fate, an opportunity for anyone daring enough. Opportunity for death, more like. The forbidden ruins. A place even sect elders dared not tread lightly. A graveyard of ancient immortal clans buried beneath endless layers of collapsed space and shattered Tao. No sect would ever allow a proper disciple to enter. But Xuan was no disciple. He had nothing left to lose. That evening he visited Granny Chen. The old woman was hunched over her cauldrons, stirring herbs that smelled of rot and regret. When Xuan mentioned the forbidden ruins, she dropped her ladle. "You fool," she hissed. "The ruins, they are the grave of Era's boy. Even the sovereigns of old fell there." "I need power," Xuan said quietly. "I need something." Granny Chen stared into his burning eyes and sighed. She hobbled to a dusty chest, rummaged through relics, and pressed a small bone-carved talisman into his palm. "This is a token of the spirit binders," she whispered. "It may protect you. Once. Maybe not even that." "Thank you, Granny." As he turned to leave, she called out, "Xuan." He paused. "Remember this. The greater the fire, the greater the ash." He nodded and disappeared into the mist. For 3 days, Xuan crossed broken fields and spirit-blighted forests. For 3 nights he slept under the yawning void, listening to the cries of unseen things. Finally, he reached the border of the forbidden ruins. A vast canyon of collapsed stone stretched before him. Monolithic statues, worn to skeletal outlines, lined the edges. Rivers of dead qi oozed like tar from the cracks. Above the entrance hung an ancient plaque, half broken. "Here ends the age of immortals." Xuan inhaled. He stepped forward, into the darkness. And deep within the ruins, beyond collapsed temples and frozen echoes of ancient battles, something stirred. Something that had waited for 16 long years. The ash flame in Xuan's soul blazed silently. The Desolate Era had ended, but a new era was about to begin. The Era of Eternal Ashes. Chapter 2. The First Seal. The darkness swallowed Xuan whole. He moved carefully, the ancient bone talisman Granny Chen had given him clutched tightly in his hand. Each step stirred thick dust. Each breath tasted of iron and mold. The canyon walls loomed on either side like the ribs of some dead god, and the oppressive silence weighed down heavier than stone. Xuan pressed forward. Hours blurred. Days, perhaps. He lost all sense of time within the ruins. Sometimes he heard whispers, soft and treacherous, curling from the cracks in the walls. Once, he glimpsed a figure standing motionless among the ruins, a gaunt thing in tattered robes. But when he blinked, it was gone. Starvation gnawed at him. Thirst clawed his throat. He stumbled upon the ruins of an ancient palace, its gates shattered, its towers collapsed into heaps of jade and bone. Symbols of long-forgotten sects lined the crumbling walls, written in scripts too old to name. In the center of the palace was a courtyard, and in its heart stood a black monolith. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, like a drum sounding from the bottom of the abyss. Xuan approached, drawn like a moth to flame. The monolith was enormous, rising 20 feet into the air. It was smooth, featureless, except for a single seam running down its center. Faintly, almost imperceptibly, he could feel the hum of power leaking from within, and carved into the stone at the base were words in the old tongue. He could barely recognize them, but he pieced it together. "Here lies the first seal. Let none awaken it. Let none claim its ash." Xuan's heart hammered. He placed his palm on the stone. The world shook. A sudden gust of freezing air exploded from the monolith, blasting him backwards. He hit the ground hard, coughing, shivering as the temperature plummeted. Around him, ghostly shapes flickered, the echoes of ancient cultivators locked in eternal battle, their forms twisted by time and betrayal. A voice rumbled from the stone, low and ancient. "Who seeks the ash of sovereigns?" Xuan rose to his knees. "I do," he whispered hoarsely. "I seek power. I seek freedom." The voice rumbled again, amused, or perhaps pitying. "Power demands sacrifice. Freedom demands chains. Will you offer what little you have left?" Xuan hesitated. He thought of Qingxi's mocking faces, of Granny Chen's worried gaze, of the life he would return to if he failed, empty, broken, scorned. He bowed his head. "I offer it," he said. The seam in the monolith widened. A sliver of blinding gray light spilled out. The ground cracked. From the rift, a shadowy form emerged, a figure wrapped in chains, its face obscured. It drifted toward Xuan, trailing smoke and ash. The chained figure spoke without sound. "Name your bond. What will you give?" Xuan struggled to find his voice. "My body," he said. "My blood. My fate." The figure paused, then it nodded. The chains unraveled from its form and lashed around Xuan, coiling around his arms, his chest, his throat. They burned cold, searing into his flesh, carving sigils of binding across his skin. He screamed, but he did not pull away. The chains sank into him, vanishing beneath his skin, and suddenly he could feel it, a furnace igniting in the hollow of his soul, a vast, terrible power, raw and endless, filling every vein, every bone, every breath. The first seal was his. The chained figure dissipated into ash, carried away on an unfelt wind. Xuan collapsed onto his hands and knees, gasping. When he looked up, the courtyard had changed. The ruins were sharper now, their edges clearer, as if the ruins themselves had acknowledged him. Above, the monolith cracked and shattered, raining shards of black stone around him. At the center of the rubble, something glowed faintly. Xuan approached and found a fragment, a shard of obsidian, no larger than his palm, etched with shifting silver lines. When he touched it, knowledge flooded his mind. Techniques, paths of cultivation long lost to the current world. The Way of Ash, a heretical path born from the remnants of broken Taos, feeding on death and ruin to grow stronger. A path unblessed by the heavens, a path suited for those abandoned by fate. Xuan smiled grimly. He pocketed the shard and rose to his feet, swaying slightly from exhaustion. A faint path stretched out before him now, illuminated by unseen forces leading deeper into the ruins. The first seal was only the beginning. There were others, more seals, more power, more chains to forge or break. Xuan tightened his fists, feeling the new strength humming beneath his skin. The heavens had abandoned him. Now he would abandon the heavens. Without a backward glance, he stepped forward into the dark. The journey had truly begun. Chapter 3. Ashborn. The ruins grew colder the deeper Xuan walked. The crumbling walls stretched higher, casting long, twisted shadows. The whispering voices grew louder, threading together into half-formed songs of sorrow. Now and then, pale lights flickered in the distance. Wraiths or illusions he could no longer tell. He gripped the shard of obsidian tightly in his hand. Each step felt heavier. The chains embedded in his body pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. A constant reminder that he was no longer the boy who had entered this place. Ahead, a faint glimmer cut through the gloom. Xuan crouched behind a pile of rubble, narrowing his eyes. In a clearing stood a figure, tall, armored in corroded bronze, its helmet cracked and rusted. It stood motionless, as if waiting, a massive halberd planted into the ground beside it. But this was no living man. The spirit's armor was empty, its chest a hollow void swirling with black mist. An Ashborn. The memories from the shard whispered to him. Ashborn were remnants of once great warriors bound by death and anger. They were guardians of the seals, testaments to the cruelty of the ruins. Xuan's pulse quickened. He needed to pass through that clearing to reach the next seal. There was no choice but to fight. He rose silently, gathering the faint threads of energy that now answered his call. The ash path was different from conventional cultivation. It drew on decay, entropy, the unmaking of things. He summoned it now, weaving strands of gray ki between his fingers. The Ashborn stirred. Its empty helm turned toward him, sensing the disturbance. Without a sound, it lifted the halberd. Xuan didn't wait. He darted forward, the air around him crackling with cold energy. He lashed out with a burst of ash ki, aiming to shatter the spirit's form before it could fully awaken. The Ashborn moved with terrifying speed. The halberd cleaved downward, splitting the ground where Xuan had stood a heartbeat earlier. The shockwave hurled him backward, slamming him into a ruined wall. Pain exploded through his ribs. He gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand. The Ashborn charged. Xuan ducked under the sweeping blade, rolling to the side. His fingers brushed the ground, gathering dust and bone fragments, shaping them into jagged darts infused with decay. He hurled them. They struck the Ashborn's armor, corroding the bronze with hissing smoke. The spirit faltered, momentarily slowed. Xuan seized the chance. He surged forward, ash chains coiling from his arms, wrapping around the Ashborn's legs. The chains tightened, anchoring the spirit in place. The Ashborn roared, a hollow, mournful sound, and swung its halberd in a desperate arc. The blade grazed Xuan's shoulder, tearing flesh and cloth. Blood sprayed. He staggered, vision swimming. But he didn't fall. He poured every ounce of his will into the chains, forcing them deeper, siphoning the spirit's strength. The Ashborn's body cracked. Mist billowed from the fractures. With a final cry, Xuan drove his hand into the Ashborn's chest, unleashing a surge of devouring ash. The spirit unraveled. The halberd clattered to the ground, its edges corroding into nothingness. Xuan collapsed to his knees, panting. His shoulder throbbed with agony. His blood, tinged with faint silver from the ash path's influence, stained the ground. But he was alive, and stronger. He could feel the difference already. The Ashborn's dissolution had fed the chains within him, reinforcing his body, his mind, his spirit. He had survived his first true battle. Slowly, he rose. Beyond the clearing, a new path unfurled, paved with broken bones and shattered jade tiles. At the path's end loomed a massive archway, carved with the image of a dragon devouring its own tail. The second seal waited there. Xuan tightened the wrappings around his bleeding shoulder and pressed on, every step a testament to the boy he had been, and the weapon he was becoming. The ruins whispered after him, hungry and watching, but Xuan did not fear them anymore. He was Ashborn now. Chapter 4. The Dragon Gate. The archway loomed before him, silent and ancient. The carved dragon wound around the gate, its stone eyes seeming almost alive under the dim, flickering light. As Xuan approached, a low hum resonated through the ground, vibrating up through his bones. The second seal. He tightened the bindings around his wounded shoulder. Blood loss had made him lightheaded, but he forced his body to move, his footsteps slow but steady. At the foot of the archway, an inscription awaited. Xuan knelt to read it, brushing away centuries of dust with shaking fingers. The worthy must endure the judgment of blood, spirit, and will. Only then may the gate open. His heart sank. It would not be a simple confrontation this time. A soft click echoed through the ruins. Before Xuan could react, the floor beneath him gave way. He plummeted into darkness. He landed hard on a circular platform surrounded by endless void. Above him, the dragon gate shimmered in the air, distant and unreachable. A voice, ancient, neither male nor female, spoke inside his mind. First trial, blood. The ground trembled. From the shadows emerged 3 figures, each identical to Xuan, down to the smallest scar and expression. But their eyes glowed a malevolent crimson. Without hesitation, they attacked. Xuan barely blocked the first blow, staggering backward as one doppelganger slashed at him with a blade formed from solidified qi. The second drove a knee into his ribs. The third spun and struck him across the face, sending him sprawling. He tasted blood. Pain lanced through his body, but he forced himself upright. This was no ordinary battle. This was against himself, against all the anger, fear, and weakness he carried. The ash path within him stirred, reacting to his turmoil. Xuan narrowed his eyes. He was not the same boy who had fled through the burning villages. He was not the same boy who had cowered before the Ashborn. He unleashed the ash chains, whipping them forward. One doppelganger dodged, but Xuan anticipated the movement, twisting the chains mid-air to ensnare its legs. With a savage yank, he slammed the figure into the ground. Another charged. Xuan met it head-on, channeling the corroding ash through his fist. When he struck, the figure unraveled into dust. The third doppelganger circled warily, then lunged. They clashed in a furious exchange, Xuan matching his double blow for blow. It was like fighting a mirror, every strength and flaw exposed. At last, with a guttural roar, Xuan found an opening and plunged his hand into the figure's chest. dispersing it into smoke. Breathing hard, he staggered. The voice spoke again. Second trial, spirit. From the void rose images, faces he recognized. His mother smiling sadly. His friends from the burned village, reaching out with blackened hands. His younger self, kneeling in helpless despair. They surrounded him, accusing. You left us. You were too weak. You failed. Xuan trembled. He had spent years burying these memories, pretending he had moved on. But here, the ruins stripped away all lies. The ash path whispered, embrace it. Accept what you are to become, what you must be. He closed his eyes. Tears streaked down his cheeks. I did fail, he whispered. I did run. I was weak. He knelt, pressing his forehead to the cold stone. But I will not be weak anymore. The illusions shuddered and shattered. The final voice boomed. Third trial. Will. The void began to collapse, folding inward. Gravity twisted. Time splintered. Xuan found himself alone atop a crumbling pillar, barely wide enough to stand on. A hurricane of screaming winds circled him, tearing at his body, threatening to fling him into the abyss. Above, the dragon gate hovered, so close, yet unreachable. A single thought echoed in his mind. Leap. He knew the truth. The gate could only be opened by faith, by sacrifice. Gritting his teeth, Xuan forced his battered body to move. The pillar crumbled further. He had no margin for error. He sprinted. The world tilted and screamed around him. He jumped. For a moment, he hung suspended between earth and sky, a speck against the endless void. Then he plunged toward the dragon gate. Pain exploded through him as invisible forces tore at his soul. But he gritted his teeth, forcing his hand forward. He touched the gate. The world shattered. Xuan awoke, lying in a field of silver grass. Above him, the dragon gate stood wide open, its carvings now shining with a soft, living light. The chains embedded in his body pulsed warmly. New power flowed through him, a deep, ancient strength. He had passed the second seal. Slowly, painfully, he stood. In the distance, the next leg of the ruins stretched onward, vast and foreboding. Xuan tightened the wrappings around his wounds and smiled grimly. He had crossed the threshold. There would be no turning back now. Chapter 5. The Warden of Sorrow. The mist grew thicker as Xuan moved forward. Silver grass gave way to a barren expanse of stone, and the sky overhead darkened to an oppressive leaden gray. Strange shapes loomed in the distance, ruined temples, half-buried statues, and cracked monuments whispering of forgotten ages. Each step felt heavier than the last. The ash path inside him trembled with unease. Something ancient watches. Xuan tightened his grip on the shard blade he carried, his senses sharp, his breath measured. Ahead, at the center of a broken amphitheater, a figure stood silently. It wore heavy, ornate armor pitted by time, and a tattered black cloak that billowed in a wind Xuan could not feel. Its face was hidden behind a visor shaped like a weeping face, and from its right hand hung a chained weapon, a massive flail covered in rusted spikes. The figure raised its head. The chains on its weapon rattled like the cries of mourning spirits. You who walk the ash path, the figure said, its voice echoing hollowly across the ruins. Why do you come here? Xuan hesitated. I seek the throne of the fallen king, he replied. I seek to reclaim what was lost. The figure tilted its head. And will you bear the sorrow of 1,000 broken worlds to do so? Xuan nodded once. The Warden of Sorrow, the last guardian of the old world, stepped forward. Without another word, the ground trembled, and dozens of spectral chains shot out from the cracked stones, aiming to ensnare Xuan. He moved instantly. The ash chains within him surged forth, colliding with the spectral ones. For a moment, there was a clash of wills, the air thick with grinding spiritual energy. Xuan rolled aside as the flail came crashing down, pulverizing the ground where he had stood. The warden moved with inhuman speed, its movements both tragic and terrifying, like a grieving god determined to carry out its duty. Their battle spiraled across the amphitheater. Every blow Xuan landed was countered. Every seal he invoked was shattered by the warden's sheer willpower. "This world is dead," the warden intoned, swinging its flail in a wide arc that forced Xuan to leap backward. "Its kings betrayed it. Its heroes abandoned it. What makes you think you are any different?" Xuan wiped blood from the corner of his mouth and rose, his muscles trembling but his eyes burning. "I don't," he said hoarsely, "but I will try anyway." He formed the seal of ash and flame, a technique he had seen only in fragments during his training. Drawing upon the pain of his trials, he ignited his own life force for a brief moment of overwhelming strength. The warden hesitated, just for a breath. It was enough. Xuan hurled himself forward, ducking under the flail, slipping past the spectral chains and driving his blade into the heart of the ancient armor. There was a sound like a sigh. The warden staggered. Its armor cracked, and from within it spilled not blood but thousands of shimmering motes, memories, fragments of all the warriors who had fallen before. The warden collapsed to one knee. "You have endured," it rasped. "Perhaps hope still remains." It thrust its armored hand toward him. Xuan hesitated, then grasped it. A surge of visions flooded his mind. Ruined empires, betrayed gods, the collapse of heaven itself, and then a final image, a broken throne atop a mountain of ash, the throne of the fallen king. When the vision faded, Xuan found himself alone once more. The warden's armor had crumbled into dust, leaving behind only a small gleaming token, a shard of the ancient crown of dominion. Xuan picked it up carefully, feeling its weight, far heavier than it seemed. Another step forward. Another burden added to his soul. The road ahead beckoned, darker and more dangerous than ever. But Xuan's resolve only hardened. He would walk this ash path to its bitter end. He would reclaim the throne, or die in the attempt. And somewhere in the highest reaches of the ruins something stirred, something watching, waiting. Chapter 6. The Verdant Labyrinth. The world shifted as Xuan stepped beyond the amphitheater's shattered stones. Where once there had been ruins and ash, now there was only endless green, vines thick as ropes, trees towering like pillars in a cathedral built by nature's wrath. The air was heavy with the scent of moss and damp earth. Above, faint beams of light struggled through a suffocating canopy, painting everything in hues of sickly emerald. Xuan paused at the threshold, wary. This was no natural forest. It was a labyrinth, a living prison. He could feel it, the way the vines curled inward after he passed, the way the trees seemed to twist when he looked away. This place was not designed to be escaped. He pressed forward. Each step deeper into the verdant labyrinth drew out strange whispers at the edges of his mind. Memories not entirely his own. The laughter of children he had never met. The scent of a mother's cooking long forgotten. A battlefield where the sky bled fire. He clenched his fists. This place feeds on memory, hours, or was it days? Passed without change. Xuan marked his path with sigils carved into trees, but every time he turned back, the marks had vanished. "You are alone here." The words were not spoken aloud, but they sank into his bones. Then came the illusions. First, a glimpse of his parents, faces he had not seen since his youth, calling to him from between the twisted trees. Then the vision of Shi, his childhood friend, smiling sweetly, beckoning him to turn back. "Come home, Xuan," she whispered. He nearly stepped toward her but caught himself. The ash path within him pulsed, warning of deceit. Xuan pressed on, refusing to look back again. The labyrinth retaliated. The vines lashed at him, forming monstrous shapes. Wolves with empty eyes, serpents with 1,000 mouths, warriors made of bark and moss. Xuan fought with brutal precision, cutting a path through the illusions, though every wound he inflicted seemed to echo back upon his soul. Deeper, deeper. Until at last, he reached a clearing. At its center stood a massive tree, its trunk wide enough to house a castle. In its roots sat an old man in gray robes, eyes closed, breathing slowly. as if asleep. Xuan approached cautiously. The man's eyes opened. They were the color of old leaves, rich with sorrow. "You seek the throne," the old man said, voice dry as autumn leaves. "But first you must confront yourself." From behind the tree, a second figure stepped forth. Xuan froze. It was himself, or rather a twisted, darker version of him. The same face, but crueler. The same sword, but stained black with dried blood. The darker Xuan smiled. "You are a fool," he said, clawing at dreams, struggling against the inevitable decay of the world. "You will die forgotten." Xuan drew his blade. "I know," he said, "but I'll die fighting." The battle was vicious. Every strike his darker self landed felt like a blow to his spirit. Every counter-strike Xuan made dredged up more of his own regrets. Choices not made, people not saved, words left unspoken. Steel clashed against steel until both combatants bled and gasped for breath. Finally, with a roar, Xuan drove his blade through the heart of his shadow. The illusion shattered. The labyrinth groaned, vines withering, trees splintering, as if the very foundation of the place had been wounded. The old man smiled sadly. "You are not free of your burdens," he said, "but you have the strength to carry them." He reached into the roots of the great tree and withdrew a second relic, a silver ring carved with ancient runes, the seal of verdant memory. "Take it," he said. "It will shield your mind from what lies ahead." Xuan accepted the ring. As soon as it touched his skin, clarity rushed through him. The mist receded. The labyrinth crumbled into dust. When he looked up, he stood once more upon the broken road leading toward the heart of the ruins. Ahead, atop a mountain that pierced the clouds, loomed the silhouette of the throne of the fallen king. And something waited, a power vast and ancient. Xuan sheathed his blade. No more illusions, no more regrets. Only the final climb remained. Chapter 7. The Ashen Summit. The mountain loomed before him, its cliffs blackened by ancient fires, its peak lost in a shroud of perpetual storm. The Ashen Summit. Many had tried to reach the throne of the fallen king. None had returned. Xuan tightened the silver ring around his finger, the seal of verdant memory, and began the ascent. The first steps were deceptively simple, following a narrow trail worn into the crumbling stone. But soon the path twisted and fractured, splitting into jagged ledges and broken stairways hanging over bottomless chasms. The wind howled, carrying with it faint, mournful wails. Whether the cries of the dead or the tricks of the summit, Xuan could not tell. He pressed on. Hours passed, or perhaps days. He lost track of time as exhaustion gnawed at him, and the air thinned. Halfway up the summit, the first of the guardians appeared. A figure clad in scorched armor, its face hidden behind a cracked helm. In one hand it held a jagged glaive, blackened with age. In the other, a tattered banner that bore no sigil. The guardian said nothing. It only charged. Xuan barely drew his blade in time to deflect the first blow, a strike heavy enough to split stone. Sparks rained down the cliffside as the two clashed, every strike sending tremors through the narrow ledge. Xuan fought defensively, testing the guardian's rhythm. He realized quickly the guardian had no soul. It moved with mechanical precision, fueled by the lingering will of the mountain itself, a construct of sorrow. Realizing he could not win with strength alone, Xuan shifted his tactics. He baited the guardian into overextending, then slipped past its guard, driving his blade into the gap between its scorched plates. The guardian let out a hollow gasp and crumbled into ash. Xuan staggered forward, breathing hard. This was only the beginning. Further up, the weather worsened. Icy rain lashed his face and lightning split the sky with deafening cracks. He found shelter beneath a crag and built a small fire with what little dry tinder he carried. As he sat, tending his wounds, Xuan heard a voice. Not from without, from within. "Why do you climb, Xuan?" it whispered. "Why chase power that will only betray you?" He closed his eyes, gripping the seal tightly. He remembered the faces of the fallen, the promises he had made, the price already paid. I climb, he said aloud, because there is no one else left to. The storm shrieked in anger, but did not touch him. When morning came, or what passed for morning on the ashen summit, he resumed his climb. Higher, harder. At the final precipice, 2 more guardians awaited him. One wore robes of a priest, its face hidden behind a veil of gold chains. It carried no weapon, only a book bound in living flesh. The other wore the armor of a king, crowned with thorns, wielding a sword as broad as a man. The priest spoke first. Confess, it intoned, voice hollow. Relinquish your ambitions. Lay down your blade. The king raised his sword. Or perish. Xuan stepped forward, blade in hand, heart steady. I will neither kneel nor confess, he said, not until the last breath leaves my body. The duel began. Fighting 2 such foes was unlike anything he had faced before. The priest unleashed spells of binding and illusion, seeking to strip Xuan of his will. The king rained down brutal, sweeping attacks that shattered the earth itself. Xuan moved like a shadow, weaving between death and destiny. At last, seeing no other choice, he invoked the full power of the Ash Path, the ancient legacy he had inherited. His sword blazed with black fire, each strike fueled by the memories of those who had fallen before him. He slew the priest first, cutting through its spells with a roar of defiance. The king fought harder, but without the priest's bindings, Xuan found his rhythm. With a final, desperate charge, he drove his blade through the king's heart. The armored figure collapsed wordlessly, dissolving into a storm of ash. Xuan stood alone, at the summit. Before him, set into the heart of a crater of black stone, stood the throne of the fallen king. A seat carved from obsidian, wrapped in chains of starlight, crowned with the bones of a dragon. And upon it sat a figure cloaked in twilight. The true test had arrived. Xuan stepped forward. His destiny awaited. Chapter 8. The Throne of Sorrow. The figure on the throne did not move. Its face was hidden behind a mask of silver, smooth and featureless, reflecting the crackling storms that danced across the ashen summit. Xuan approached slowly, every step heavy with the weight of unseen power. The ground beneath his feet groaned as if the very mountain resented his presence. The figure finally spoke, voice neither male nor female, but something ancient and aching. Why have you come? Xuan bowed slightly, blade resting against his shoulder. I seek the authority to change the fate of the shattered world. The masked being tilted its head. The authority you seek is not given freely, it must be claimed, and the price is steep. I am willing, Xuan said without hesitation. The figure rose from the throne. Chains of starlight unraveled from its arms and pooled at its feet, swirling like living things. You do not yet understand what you ask, the guardian whispered. To claim the throne is to bear the world's sorrow, to carry its sins, its despair, forever. Xuan tightened his grip on his blade. Better I carry it than leave it to rot. The guardian extended a hand. Then come. The battle began without warning. The guardian moved like flowing water, every strike a seamless blend of offense and defense. Its chains lashed out, slicing through stone and sky alike. Xuan countered with all his skill, weaving the ancient forms he had mastered. But he quickly realized, this was not a duel of strength. It was a duel of wills. Each clash forced visions into his mind, the faces of those he had failed, the villages burned, the comrades lost, the loved ones betrayed. Guilt struck harder than any blade. He faltered, just for a moment, and the guardian's chain wrapped around his throat, lifting him into the stormy air. Relinquish your burden, the guardian intoned. You are not enough. You never were. The words dug deep, reopening old wounds. Xuan closed his eyes, trembling. But then, through the storm of sorrow, he heard a voice, not the guardian's, not his own, but the faint echo of his mother's lullaby. Stand, my son, even if the heavens fall. Stand. His eyes snapped open. With a roar, he summoned the last reserves of his strength and flared the ash path to its limit. Dark flame wreathed his body, burning away the Guardian's chains. He fell to the ground heavily, coughing, but alive. The Guardian charged again, its form flickering. Xuan met it head-on. He fought not as a prodigy, not as a chosen hero, but as a man who had crawled through blood and fire and loss. Their final clash shook the summit. The Guardian stumbled. For the first time, Xuan saw beneath the mask only darkness, a void where a soul should have been. With a cry, he drove his sword through the Guardian's heart. The figure froze, then crumbled into motes of silver light. The throne stood unguarded. Xuan staggered forward. As he placed a hand upon it, the chains of starlight writhed but did not resist. Instead, they coiled around his arms gently, like vines around a broken tree. Visions poured into him. The histories of fallen dynasties, the sufferings of forgotten peoples, the betrayals, the wars, the hopes extinguished. It was overwhelming. His knees buckled. But he did not let go. "I accept it all," he whispered. The throne blazed with light. The summit trembled. Far below, the world itself shifted, as if recognizing a new sovereign. When the light faded, Xuan sat upon the throne. No crown adorned his brow. No fanfare greeted his victory. Only silence and sorrow. Yet deep within, a small ember of hope burned. The boy who had once knelt in the ashes of his village now ruled the fate of nations. The throne of sorrow had a new master, and he would not fail them. Not this time. Chapter 9. The War of the Five Clans. The wind howled across the broken plains, carrying with it the stench of war. 5 banners flew against the twilight sky, each marked with the crest of an ancient clan: the wolf, the tiger, the crane, the serpent, and the bear. These were the 5 clans, sworn enemies of each other for centuries, now bound by a fragile alliance forged from hatred. Hatred for the new ruler who dared sit upon the throne of sorrow. Xuan stood atop the blackened walls of Dawnspire Fortress, the last stronghold between the 5 clans and the capital. His armor gleamed under the dying sun, though the weight of the mantle he bore seemed heavier than any steel. Behind him, the banners of the Ashen Order flapped in defiance. General Yue, a grizzled veteran with half a face of scars, approached. "My lord," he said, bowing low, "our scouts report the 5 clans will reach us by nightfall. Their numbers are overwhelming." Xuan said nothing for a moment, watching the dust rise on the horizon. "Let them come," he said at last, his voice like iron. "Dawnspire has weathered worse." The general hesitated. "We have 3,000 men. They have 30,000. A small, wry smile touched Xuan's lips. "Then we will teach them that numbers alone do not win battles." The sun sank below the horizon, and the war horns of the 5 clans blared. The first assault came swift and brutal. Waves of warriors in mismatched armor slammed against Dawnspire's gates, ladders rising like teeth against the walls. Flaming arrows rained down, setting sections of the fortress ablaze. Xuan moved through the chaos like a phantom. Wherever the fighting was thickest, he appeared. A sword stroke here, a shouted command there, rallying his soldiers with sheer will. The defenders fought like men possessed, inspired by the unyielding presence of their lord. But it was not enough. By midnight, a section of the outer wall had collapsed under sheer weight of numbers. General Yue found Xuan amid the rubble. "We must fall back to the inner keep," he shouted over the din. "We can't hold them here." Xuan wiped blood from his blade. "Send the order," he said grimly, "and prepare the last defense." In the great hall of Dawnspire, Xuan met with his remaining commanders. Their faces were grim, their armor dented and bloodied. "We cannot win through force alone," General Yue said. "We must break their spirit." Xuan nodded slowly. "I will go to parley," he said. A stunned silence fell. "You can't," Yue protested. "They'll kill you." Xuan smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but if I can plant doubt in their ranks, if I can make them see that their unity is a lie." He rose. "I must try." Beneath a banner of truce, Xuan rode alone into the enemy camp. The lords of the 5 clans gathered in a vast tent of black silk, sneering at the lone rider who dared approach. The lord of the Wolf clan, a hulking man with eyes like ice, stepped forward. "You come to beg, boy?" he growled. Xuan dismounted calmly. "I come to offer you truth." Murmurs rippled through the tent. "You stand united today," Xuan said, his voice carrying. "But tomorrow, when the Ashen Order falls, who among you will claim the spoils?" The lord of the Tiger clan shifted uneasily. "Will you divide Dawnspire into 5? Will you trust each other with your backs turned?" The lord of the Serpent clan narrowed her eyes. "Or will the strongest among you betray the others and take everything for himself?" Whispers grew louder. Xuan pressed on. "You do not need me to tear yourselves apart. You will do it yourselves." He turned without waiting for a reply. Behind him, seeds of doubt took root. That night, as the 5 clans prepared for their final assault, arguments erupted among their lords. Old grievances resurfaced. Accusations flew. By dawn, the fragile alliance was broken. The Crane and the Bear clans withdrew first, marching their armies away from the battlefield. The Tiger clan attacked the Wolf clan in a surprise raid, and the Serpent clan slithered away into the mists. From the walls of Dawnspire, Xuan watched it all unfold. General Yue stood beside him, awestruck. "You turned them against each other without lifting a sword," he said. Xuan sheathed his blade. "Sometimes," he said, "the sharpest weapon is doubt." The war was not over, but the tide had turned. Dawnspire stood. And so did Xuan, a ruler forged not only in battle, but in cunning. The world had begun to see. The boy from the ashes was becoming something else entirely. A sovereign whom even the gods would one day fear. Chapter 10. The Shattered Heavens. The morning after the battle of the 5 clans dawned cold and silent. Smoke still curled from the broken fields beyond Dawnspire, but inside the fortress a strange calm reigned. Victory, fragile and incomplete, hung in the air like mist. Xuan stood upon the highest tower, gazing northward. He knew peace was an illusion. Beyond the broken alliances of the 5 clans, greater forces stirred, ancient powers that no mortal blade could touch. He could feel it in his bones. The heavens themselves had turned their gaze upon him. That night, the stars fell. Blazing trails of light seared across the heavens. The ground trembled with each impact, and strange phenomena twisted the skies, auroras of blood and fire. General Yue burst into Xuan's chambers, wide-eyed. "My lord, portents, everywhere. The astrologers say the mandate of heaven is fracturing." Xuan calmly donned his armor. "Then we must be ready." Ready for what, he did not say, but he knew. The 9 immortal sects, custodians of the world's balance for 1,000 years, would not sit idle as a mortal boy reshaped destiny. They would come, and they would bring judgment. At the gates of twilight, Xuan met them. 9 masters, each cloaked in robes of stars and mist, descended upon the mortal realm. Their leader, the immortal lord of azure sky, stepped forward. "You have disturbed the cycle," he said, his voice layered with 1,000 echoes. Xuan stood unbowed. "I have only survived," he replied. "Survival is no crime." The immortal lord's gaze hardened. "You have overturned kingdoms, sown rebellion among the 5 clans, shattered the ancient seals of fate. The heavens must correct this imbalance." Xuan smiled grimly. "Then let them try." The final battle began not with swords, but with will. The sky tore apart as celestial ki raged. Dawnspire fortress crumbled under the weight of unleashed power. Xuan, mere mortal though he was, wove through the storm, his sword trailing arcs of pure defiance. General Yue and the Ashen Order fought alongside him, knowing they could not defeat gods, only delay them. But Xuan had one weapon the Immortals had never anticipated: the loyalty of the living, the faith of thousands, and a secret. Deep within Dawnspire's heart, a sealed relic pulsed, The Stone of Mourning, a fragment of the primordial era when gods and mortals had once been equals. Xuan, bleeding and battered, reached it as the heavens themselves sought to crush him. He placed his hand upon the stone and remembered. He remembered the mother who had died to shield him from the tyrants, the comrades who had bled for his dreams, the people who had given him their trust. With a roar that shook the foundations of the world, Xuan unleashed the stone's power. Light exploded outward. The Immortals staggered, their forms unraveling in the torrent. Xuan rose into the sky, his mortal body burned to its limits, yet still standing. "I am the child of ruin," he cried, "and the architect of rebirth." The heavens cracked. The 9 Immortals were cast down, not destroyed, but humbled. The mandate of heaven itself wavered, not broken but rewritten, not by the will of gods, but by the will of a single man. When the light faded, Xuan collapsed upon the broken stones of Dawnspire. General Yue found him there, smiling despite his wounds. "You did it," Yue said hoarsely. "No," Xuan murmured, gazing up at the shattered sky where stars reformed anew. "We did." Years later, they would call it the shattering of heaven. Histories would speak of Xuan not as a tyrant or a conqueror, but as the first sovereign of the new era, a man who defied destiny itself. And though many trials still awaited him, one truth would remain eternal, that sometimes, even in the desolation of the world, a single unyielding heart could reshape the stars. Epilogue. The Sovereign and the Stars. The years passed like ripples across a quiet lake. After the shattering of heaven, the world entered an age without precedent, a time without gods to dictate the fates of men. For the first time, the course of history was not written in the stars, but forged by mortal hands. At the heart of this new world stood Xuan. He never claimed the title of emperor. He had seen what empires could become, bloated, corrupt, decaying from within. Instead, he built a council of voices, chosen from all clans and peoples, to guide the realm together. General Yue became the shield of the realm, overseeing the defenses of a world still recovering from divine upheaval. The Ashen Order became peacekeepers and scholars, traveling the land to mend old wounds and teach the lessons learned in blood. Dawnspire Fortress, once a battered relic of resistance, was rebuilt, not as a palace but as a university, where knowledge and freedom reigned supreme. Xuan, though scarred and weary, lived among his people. He taught children to read. He walked among the market stalls, laughing with farmers and smiths. He sat under trees and told stories of an era when the stars themselves could be challenged. And sometimes, late at night, he would look up at the sky. The heavens, once cold and immutable, now shimmered with unfamiliar constellations, new patterns written by mortal dreams. One evening, as the first snows of winter fell, Xuan stood atop the tower of Dawnspire, cloaked in a simple robe. General Yue approached, older now, his beard streaked with white. "You should rest," Yue said. "The council can handle the winter edicts." Xuan smiled faintly. "I will, soon." He gazed at the stars, thoughtful. "Tell me, Yue, do you think they resent us? The Immortals?" Yue shrugged. "Maybe, but perhaps they also admire us." Xuan laughed softly. "Perhaps." As the snow settled upon the world, Xuan closed his eyes. He was not a god. He was not a tyrant. He was merely a man who had dared to dream beyond the limits set for him, and in doing so, had taught a broken world to dream as well. The stars above shone brighter, their cold light softer than before, as if in silent acknowledgement. Thus ended the story of Xuan, the sovereign who shattered heaven. And thus began a new story, not written by the decree of distant gods, but by the hearts and hopes of all who walked beneath the ever-changing sky.